Psalm 16, the New Revised Standard Version, reads as follows. Protect me, O God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good apart from you. As for the holy ones in the land, they are the noble in whom is all my delight. Those who choose another God multiply their sorrows. Their drink offerings of blood I will not pour out or take their names upon my lips. The Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. I have a goodly heritage. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. In the night also my heart instructs me. I keep the Lord always before me. Because he is at my right hand, I shall not be moved. Therefore, my heart is glad, and my soul rejoices. My body also rests secure. For you do not give me up to Sheol, or let your faithful one see the pit. You show me the path of life. In your presence, there's fullness of joy. In your right hand are pleasures forevermore. Thus far, the word of the Lord. You may be seated. Protect me, O God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good apart from you. The Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. In the night also my heart instructs me. I keep the Lord always before me because he is at my right hand. I shall not be moved. I want to preach today from the subject, determinations for living. Determinations for living. Today, I, along with others, celebrate the blessing of another year. And to all of you whose birthdays occurred this past week, as well as those whose birthdays will follow this first day of the week, I say happy birthday. If my daughter Carson is listening to me by perchance, I'll give her an early birthday greeting. If you go on Carson's Instagram, you will see that she has a countdown to her birthday. Her birthday is January the 29th. We have 7 days between us. I asked the Lord, please don't let it be on my day. And he gave her 7 more because she knew she needed her own. But I thank God. I thank God for his grace, his mercy, and his eternal purpose, which has kept me alive. I bear witness that it is of the Lord's mercies that I have not been consumed. His compassions fail not, they are new every morning. Great has been the Lord's faithfulness unto me. If I were older and if we still had an adult choir or a sanctuary choir, I would join them in singing, "We've come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord, trusting in his holy word. He's never failed me yet. Oh, can't turn around. We've come this far by faith." As I look back at the past year of my life and anticipate moving into what will be some significant milestones in the upcoming year, I'm 59 today, which means next year, amen, which means next year I will be 60. That's a significant milestone. Lady Kim and I in November will be celebrating 30 years of marriage. And our church will be celebrating its 110th anniversary. There are some significant things that are happening in the next 12 months. And as I was looking back and looking forward. You know, birthdays cause you to look back, and they cause you to look forward. And as I was looking back as well as looking forward, I was drawn to reflect upon a psalm. It isn't by coincidence that our Bible study starts us this year with the Psalms. I didn't plan it. God so intended, God so orchestrated that in this month we would be dealing with one of my favorite books, because they comprise the authentic experiences of those who have a real life with God. They contain the worship and the worries of the people of God. They take you to the rapturous heights of praise and thanksgiving, as well as the distressing depths of lament, despondency, and desperation. And as such, they instruct us that a whole life with God is filled with good days and hills to climb, weary days and lonely nights. Yet when you look around and you think things over, you're still able to say all of your good days outweigh all your bad days. You make the determination, I will not complain. The Psalms are Israel's hymn book and served as the reflection source book for Jesus. And I find myself drawn to them. And in particular, as I've been looking back at 59 and looking forward towards 60, Psalm 16 really draws my attention. Its heading bears noticing. It is a miktam of David. A miktam carries several meanings. One of them is gold. The inference is that this is a golden psalm. It is one whose content should be prized as gold. Another meaning is that of engraved. It is a song which means to be engraved. It is one that is intended not simply to be sung, but one that is to be etched within one's heart, mind, and spirit. In other words, this psalm is one whose words are meant to stay with you. It is composed in a particular time of David's life. It is when David is in flight from Saul. He has had to leave his home, the land that belonged to him and to his family, since the initial distribution of the land during the time of Joshua is no longer available to him and his family. His family has fled the fields of Bethlehem and has gone now into the land of Moab. And while David's experience is one of dislocation, his expression is not one of distress, but rather determination. And David expresses his determinations. Whether you realize it or not, the sum total of life is comprised of the decisions that we make. Wherever you end up based largely upon choices and responses to situations. And every decision expresses a determination, a resolution, a discernment, an intuition, a settling. And in this psalm, David reveals some core determinations for living. In truth, there is one central determination from which other determinations are derivatives. There is one core settling that serves as the basis upon which all other matters would be settled. If I were to ask you, what is your core determination? What is the one thing upon which you are settled that helps you settle everything else? Because, friends, if you do not have something that settles you, that helps you settle everything else, your life will always be confused. It will always be moved by that which is external to you, because there is nothing solid within you that helps you settle everything else. David has a core determination which helps him settle everything else. And it's contained in verses 1 and 2. Listen to David. Protect me, O God, For in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good apart from you. The core determination for David is that of living Godwardly. His core orientation is towards God. It is summed up in the words, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good apart from you. David's core determination is to live a life of trust and surrender to God. The words of trust are, protect me, O God, for in you I take refuge. The name that he uses for God here is El, which is the name that speaks of God's power. It refers to God's strength and God's might. It signals God's omnipotence and looks at God as the creator of all that is. With God being the strong, mighty creator of all that is, David determines to take refuge in him. He looks for God to be his hiding place. His trust is not in mountains or caves. His trust is in God. He trusts God who said, let there be, and created everything to be who he is. The God who created the mountains and the caves is more than the mountains and the caves. He is greater than the mountains and the caves. And therefore, his determination to trust God causes him to seek his refuge in God. Friends, let me clue you in. Never put your trust in a creation. Put your trust in the one who created the creation. And that's what David says. My trust is not in mountains or in caves. I don't find my refuge in them. I find my refuge in the God who made the mountains, who made the caves. It's not just a trust that he expresses. It is also a surrender. He says, I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good apart from you. That name, your Lord is Yahweh, the I am that I am, I am what I was and I will be what I am right now. I will cause to happen what I choose to happen. Yahweh is the unchanging name of God. He is always who he is. David determines that the Lord would be his Lord. He determines to surrender his self of sovereignty to the one who is sovereign. He says to the Lord, you are my Lord. David wants who God is to be who God is to him. He determines to give himself to all that God is so that he might experience all that God is. True surrender is giving ourselves to all that God is so that we can experience all that God is. It is to say to the Lord, you are my Lord. All that you are to me. I give myself to all that you are for you to be all that you are to me. Now, the reason why this is important is that there are aspects of God that can never be experienced without surrender. Hear me. There are some aspects of God you will never experience without surrender. God can be many things to you without surrender, but he'll never be everything to you without surrender. And he'll never be everything to you without surrender because space has not been made for him to be everything that he is. The only way that God can be everything to you is when you give yourself to all that he is. And that begs a question, what might you be holding out from God that keeps you from experiencing all that God is? What aspect of your life might you be keeping from him? And in your keeping it from him, you are keeping yourself from experiencing all that he is. With David's determination of trust and surrender to God, there is the experience of the good and goodness that can only come from God. David sings, I have no good apart from you. Good and goodness are found in God. The Lord is good. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Good and upright is the Lord. Every good and perfect gift comes from above, from the Father of lights, in whom there is no variableness nor shadow of turning. The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. Through David, God challenges us to make a core determination of trust and surrender. It is to choose to make God the center and source of our being. It is to trust God with our security, our sovereignty, and our satisfaction. It is to make God the source of our security, our strength, our sufficiency, and our satisfaction. You see, there cannot be two people on the throne. There can only be one. And you and I choose who sits on the throne. In May, there's going to be the coronation in England of one king, Charles. No matter what we may think about him, want somebody else differently, there's only going to be one on the throne. And my friends, that is also true in our own lives. There's only one person on the throne. And we can sing Lord and not live Lord. We can sing Lord, but we're on the throne. And what David is challenging, what God is challenging us, is to make him the source of our security, our strength, our sufficiency, and our satisfaction, to say to the Lord, you are my Lord. And from this core determination come three derivative determinations. And the first two are this: to make God the ground of our expectations and the source of our enjoyment. In verse 5, there are the words, the Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. The term portion comes from the time when the land of Israel was being allotted among the 12 tribes. Each tribe received its portion. The land would be passed down from generation to generation. The portion belongs to an individual whether he or she enjoys it or not. It is an inheritance. It is that to which one looked forward. Now, David is in flight from Saul. He's separated from the fields of Bethlehem, which were his material inheritance. He's dislocated from his physical portion. But in its place, David determines that the Lord is his chosen portion. David remembers the Lord speaking to Aaron in Numbers chapter 18, verse 20, thou shalt have no allotment in their land, nor shall you have any share among them, for I am your share and your possession among the Israelites. The Lord is David's portion. His expectation is the Lord. Now that word also speaks to what is counted and what is counted on. What David counts and what David counts on is the Lord. With the Lord as his portion, he would have all that he needed, because he would have all that the Lord is. He would have what land could not give him. He would have peace and strength and love and righteousness and wisdom. All that the Lord is available and accessible to him. He would sing later, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I have everything that I need. The Lord who created the fields of Bethlehem had other fields for him. Why? Because the earth is the Lord's, the fullness thereof, and the world and they that dwell therein. With the Lord as his portion, he would be everywhere, providing him with everything. Can I say to you, that's a worthwhile determination to have? That the Lord is what you should count and count on. The Lord is who you expect. The Lord is what and who you envision. The Lord is that to whom you look. Because when that is your expectation, you release yourselves from the limitations of what, how, when, and where. So much of life is spent worried over what, how, when, and where. So much of staying up late and missing meals is over what, how, when, and where. But when you make the Lord your expectation, you free yourself from the limitations of what, how, when, and where. Because he will be and he will do whatever, however, whenever, and wherever. I've learned with the Lord as my portion. I don't have to know how, when, where, or what, as long as I know who. As long as I know that he is who he is. I know that he's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that I ask or even think. I know that his thoughts are not my thoughts, and his ways are not my ways. And as high as the heavens are above the earth, so much higher are his thoughts than my thoughts, and his ways than my ways. I determine that he's my portion. He's who I count, and he's who I count on. And because what that means is when there's been nothing for me to count and nobody to count on, I've always been able to count him. And I've always been able to count on him. And I believe I just punched somebody's ticket because you know that you had nothing to count and you had no one seemingly to count on. But the Lord was with you and you were able to count him. You were able to count on him. You believe that if God be for you, who can be against you? I believe somebody is able to give God a praise right there when you did not have anything to count and very few to count on. You, the Lord, was your portion. And you could count him and you could count on him. And that's why you can co-sign with those words, if it had not been the Lord on my side, where would I? The Lord. Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. Well, the Lord would be his portion in expectation. The Lord would also be his cup in enjoyment. That word cup speaks to something that is actually taken and experienced and enjoyed. He's just not in expecting the Lord. He is enjoying the Lord. I wonder, is there anybody who can testify that you just don't expect the Lord, you enjoy the Lord? He's not just your portion, but the Lord is also your cup. And then he says, the Lord holds his lot. The Lord seizes, the Lord maintains, the Lord upholds his lot. One image for that is that of Aaron and Hur upholding Moses' hands. David says, my destiny, my future is upheld by the Lord. His destiny is secured by the Lord, who is able to uphold it. As crazy as things may seem. With him being on the run, his future is secured by the Lord who holds it and who upholds it. In other words, what Samuel announced through his anointing is in Bethlehem is still true, even though he's no longer in Bethlehem, because whatever Samuel announced by way of anointing, it's being upheld by the Lord. The Lord holds all that the Lord has planned and purposed for him. The Lord upholds all whom the Lord has planned and purposed for him. The Lord upholds every place that the Lord has purposed and planned for him. I want somebody to know the Lord upholds your life. In other words, who you are and who you are to be is upheld by the Lord. What you are to do, what you are to receive, where you are to go, and who will be with you are all kept by the Lord. It's not for you to keep, it's the Lord who keeps it. It's the Lord who upholds it. It's the Lord who maintains it. It's the Lord who guarantees it. Now, I'm about to set somebody free. Because here it is. The Lord guards and keeps what the Lord determines for you. And he keeps what and who based upon what he has determined and drawn. And everyone whom the Lord determines is for who you are, who he is making you, and where you are going, the Lord will keep. Conversely, whoever is not for who you are, whom the Lord is making you, and where the Lord is taking you, you can't and you won't keep, because he's not keeping them. For who you are to be, for what you are supposed to do, for where you are to go in life, there is always a shaking that will loosen whatever and whoever can't be kept for where you are going. And the converse is also true. The Lord will add who and what is needed for who you are becoming and where you are going. It was out on the run that God brought some people to David who would be a part of his becoming king. There are those whom the Lord brings into your life as a sign of who you are to be and of what you are to do and of where you are to go. And God does it based upon what he has designed and what he has drawn. I've been watching, I finished watching The Best Man, the final chapters. And don't y'all act like y'all ain't been watching it too. And I love Nicole R.E. Parker. That girl is fine. She is fine. But she only lasted 3 episodes. Now, as much as I wanted her to be in other episodes, she was only in 3 episodes, because the other episodes were not drawn for her to be in them. And it didn't matter how much I wanted her to be in them. The writer had not drawn her for those episodes. I'm just trying to help somebody out, because you've been trying to keep what's already been written out of the episodes. And it doesn't matter how much you want them in the episodes. The writer of your life, the one who has drawn the lines of your life, has said they played their part, and now it's time for Shelby to come. Lord, I told you, God draws out and God draws in. Why? Verse 6 reads, the boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. I have a goodly heritage. By the boundary lines, David is again employing the imagery of the cords that were used to measure what land would be and where the land would be. And as he looks at his life and he looks at his future, he views it as having been drawn and designed by God, who upholds his lot. Look at him fleeing for his life. The parameters seem to be that of distress and despair and frustration and fear. And sometimes circumstances and enemies will try to draw lines for your life in unpleasant places. But with David's determination to trust and surrender to God, he makes room to discover the lines that God has drawn for him. And God saw more for him and drew more for him. God saw more than his shepherding his daddy's sheep and bringing care packages to his brothers. God saw more than his being a court musician and armor bearer. Therefore, God drew more for him. God drew the lines beyond the limitations of what his brothers, what Saul, and even what he saw for himself. Making God the ground of your expectations secures you in God upholding the lines that God has drawn for you. And the lines that God has drawn for you are beyond the lines drawn by your enemies, drawn by your circumstances, drawn by your situations. They are beyond even your imagining. The lines that God has drawn, David says, have fallen in pleasant places. Green pastures, still waters, paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Somebody knows that the lines that God has drawn for you defies what others saw for you. It's been beyond what you saw for yourself. If you were limited to the lines that you drew, you wouldn't be living in what you're in, because your lines were much smaller. If you were limited to the lines that you drew, you would not be where you are, because the lines that you drew did not even imagine your being or going or doing or receiving or no. Somebody ought to thank God. God, I thank you that you did not allow me to be kept by the lines that I drew for myself. I am so glad, God, that your picture for my life was much larger than what I drew. I am so glad, God, that your destiny for my life was so much better than what I saw. And here's what I'm going to hit you. I'm so glad, God, that who you saw for me was more than what I saw and who I saw for myself. Let's just imagine if God had let you stay with who you drew. You'd still be with the bride of Chucky. You'd still be with the frog. But God said, no, that ain't what I drew for you. That is not what I meant for you. I am the God who does exceedingly abundantly above all that you ask or even think, according to the power that is at work within you. Now, God's drawing the lines in pleasant places does not mean that you will avoid unpleasant experiences. It means that your life is not limited by unpleasant experiences. Joseph's lines included being sold into slavery, but they weren't limited to his being sold. The lines that God drew made the selling become God's way of sending Joseph, so that Joseph would be where he was supposed to be based upon the lines that God had drawn for him. God had drawn for him to be in Egypt, but not as a slave, but to be as the prime minister of Egypt. But the way that he got there, Lord have mercy, included some unpleasant experiences. David's lines included the time of flight from Saul, but his lines were not limited to him being a flight person. God drew his lines ultimately to his becoming king. And because God drew the lines in pleasant places, God took what the brothers meant for evil and used it for good. God took David's time of flight from Saul to develop develop David and to coalesce a crew around David that would serve as his inner circle as king. Whatever God has drawn, God holds, God keeps, God maintains, and there is nothing that disrupts it. I'm talking to somebody who can say, God, I am so glad that the lines that you have drawn take me beyond the limitations of what is unpleasant. I am so glad, God, that I've been able to see how you even worked in the unpleasant. You worked in the distressful. You worked in the dark. You worked in the ugly to bring me to where you knew that I would be, to make me into who you knew I would become, determining God to be the ground of your expectations. Secures you in your being also divinely directed. David continues singing in verse 7, I bless the Lord who gives me counsel in the night. Also my heart instructs me. Now look at this. As David flees Saul, he is also pursuing God's future. He's pursuing God's future while on the run. It's a dark season, but he's still pursuing God's future. You see, friends, dark seasons need not deter pursuit of purpose. No. When you determine to trust and surrender to God, you understand it can be dark and I still pursue you. I still pursue what you have for me. And what enables David to do it? God gave him counsel. God directed him in the night season. God showed him which way to take. God showed him when to leave the cave of Adullam and where he was to go, which was Judah. God told him to go to Keilah and rescue the people from the Philistines. And God warned him that the very people that he saved were going to betray him to Saul. With Ziklag burned to the ground, with his people having been taken, with soldiers ready to kill him, God instructed him to pursue the Amalekites, for he would surely overtake them and recover all. God directed him and instructed him in the night seasons. You see, friends, the pursuit of God and the future that he has are not simply done in the day seasons of life. It's also in the night seasons, in the dark seasons, in the depressing seasons, in the disillusioning seasons. Somebody right now, you're pursuing God and you're absolutely in the dark. You are still seeking God, even though you don't have a clue of what things are really going to look like. Because again, it doesn't matter what, where, when, or how, as long as you know who. And what enables you to pursue God in the night seasons is that God will counsel you. God will instruct you in the night seasons. And sometimes all that God tells you is to keep on keeping on. Sometimes all that God tells you is get up out the bed and go to work one more day. Sometimes all God says is don't quit. Sometimes all God says is I'm not through with you. But other times, God will talk to you and he'll give you a warning. He'll tell you to watch out for this or watch out for them. But he will instruct you in the night seasons. Am I talking to anybody who can say it was absolutely night for me? And I would have given up if God had not spoken to me. God had not counseled me, if God had not given me a word, if God had not given me an unction, if God had not given me a feeling, I would have given up. But in the night season, God was right there with me. And God gave me exactly what I needed. But verse 8 comes and David reveals That third derivative determination, he says, I keep the Lord always before me. Because he's at my right hand, I shall not be moved. Therefore, my heart is glad and my soul rejoices. My body also rests secure, for you did not give me up to Sheol, and let your faithful one see the pit. You show me the path of life, and in your presence there is fullness of joy. In your right hand are pleasures forevermore. David reveals he determines to be attentive. He determines to be mindful of the presence of the Lord. He determines to set the Lord always before him. He determines to make the Lord more present than anything or anybody else. He determines for the Lord to be before him, ahead of him, in front of him. In other words, the Lord will be his focus. And with the Lord before him, the Lord stands between him and everything else. The Lord is the medium through which he would understand and view everything. The Lord is the lens that shades and colors and shapes his perspective and influences his responses. Because before him, the Lord would prepare a table in the presence of his enemies. Before him, the Lord would anoint his head with oil. Before him, the Lord would cool his cup with refreshing waters, and causing his cup to run over into a fountain of refreshment. Practicing the presence of the Lord. That is a determination that all of us need to make. Practicing the presence of the Lord is placing the Lord before you, seeing the Lord before you, sensing the Lord before you, seeking him before you. He's ahead of whatever is ahead of you. He's in front of whatever is coming your way. And when you know that he is ahead of you and he is in front of you, whatever is coming your way, if it gets to you, it has to go through him. And if it has to go through him, he has already detoxified it, so that no weapon that's formed against you shall be able to prosper. But not only is the Lord before you, but he's also beside you. David says that the Lord is at his right hand, causing him not to be moved. The right hand is the place of favor. It's the place of power. It's the place of influence. It is where the sword is placed. It is the side of protection. The Lord is at his right hand to strengthen and to shield him. And he says, when I know that the Lord is at my right hand, it is the Lord who causes him not to be moved. The Lord stabilizes him. The Lord steadies him. The Lord anchors him. The Lord keeps him. The Lord is his keeper, and the Lord is his shade upon his right hand. The sun will not smite him by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord preserves his soul. The Lord holds him fast. The Lord holds him together. When you practice the presence of the Lord, you know that the Lord who is before you is also the Lord who is beside you. The Lord is at your right hand. The Lord covers you. The Lord shields you. The Lord holds your hand. The Lord covers you with his feathers, and under his wings are you able to trust. He's what holds you fast, causing you to be moved, so that when your soul was overwhelmed and when your soul would have given way, the Lord held you, making you firm. Come on, let's just tell the truth. We ain't always got it together. We aren't always cool. It's the presence of the Lord that holds you together. Am I talking to somebody? If the Lord had not held you, if the Lord had not steadied you, if the Lord had not upheld you, you would have given up. You would have given in. Your soul would have given way. But because the Lord was before you, and because the Lord was at your right hand, he caused you not to be moved, when everything in you wanted to be moved, the Lord held you together and caused you to be like our forebears who said, and like a tree planted by the water, I shall not be moved. The presence of the Lord that holds you together. But then David says it's the presence of the Lord that prompts joy in the midst of his uncertainty. His heart is glad, and his soul rejoices, and his body rests secure. Look at it. He's on the run, but his heart is glad. His spirit rejoices, and his body rests. Because with God as his portion, with God as his expectation, he is able to say what Habakkuk said in chapter 3. Though the fig tree does not blossom, no fruit is on the vines, though the produce of the olive fails, and the fields yield no food, though the flock is cut off from the fold, and there is no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will exalt in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer and makes me tread upon my high places. God strengthens me and causes me to be able to climb up high places where I'm not supposed to be able to go because it's too challenging. God strengthens me and makes me able to climb them, even if I'm intimidated by how jagged and how rugged and how difficult it may be. The God who is on my side is the God who strengthens me and allows me to climb up what I'm not supposed to get over. I'm talking to somebody right now who knows that your determination has been, yet will I rejoice in the midst of problems, yet will I rejoice in the midst of difficulties, yet will I rejoice in the midst of illness, yet will I rejoice in the midst of grief, yet will I rejoice in the midst of intimidating forces and factors, yet will I rejoice in the midst of a bad diagnosis, yet will I rejoice facing chemo and dealing with kidney situations, yet will I rejoice. Children acting strange and parents are involved in situations, yet will I rejoice. Why? Because the Lord is with me. And the Lord gives me a hope. Here it is, verses 10 and 11. For you do not give me up to Sheol, or let your faithful one see the pit. You show me the path of life. In your presence, there's fullness of joy. In your right hand are pleasures forevermore. David says, I know God is not going to leave me. And I know God is not going to leave me in. I know God is not going to make me dwell in death. He says, I know God is going to bring me out. God is going to see me through. God is going to show me the path of life. You see, friends, there are times when life is hell and you can't see your way out. Sometimes you've been living in a dead situation for so long, you can't see the path of life. Sometimes you feel like the words of Harold Carter, you've been down so long, getting up hadn't even crossed your mind. But in the midst of those situations, when the Lord is your expectation, when you practice the presence of the Lord, when you set the Lord before you, there's always some hope. And the hope is that the Lord will not abandon you. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, David says, I'll fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Hope assures you that with the Lord's presence, the Lord has a path through. And his path through is his path to. In other words, the Lord will not leave you where the Lord isn't going to stay. The Lord leads you to where the Lord is. And he leads you to where the Lord is headed. And he says the path of the Lord is the path to life. In other words, he has a way out. He has a way through. He has a way past. He is the path of life. Am I talking to anybody who can testify he didn't let me stay in the dark place? He didn't let me stay in the dismal place. He didn't let me stay in the night season. But he always had a way out for me. He always had a way through. Why? He shows the path of life because he is the path of life. His way, his path is the way of his presence, where there is fullness of joy. And at his right hand there are pleasures forevermore. His path and his presence will produce the joy in whatever situation you find yourself in. While God would be at David's right hand to protect David, God would allow David to experience God's right hand. It's one thing for God to be at your right hand to protect you and to shield you and to strengthen you, but it's another thing for you to be on God's right hand, because on God's right hand is the favor of God. On God's right hand is the power of God. On God's right hand is the authority of God. Psalm 18:35, you've given me the shield of your salvation, and your right hand has supported me. Your help has made me great. Psalm 26, now I know that the Lord will help his anointed. He will answer him from his holy heaven, and mighty victories by his right hand. Psalm 48:10, your right hand is full of righteousness. Psalm 63:8, my soul clings to you. Your right hand upholds me. Psalm 139, if I take the wings of the morning and dwell at the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall your hand lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. The Lord will show you the path of life, and his path will always lead you to his presence, and you'll find that in his presence there's fullness of joy, and at his right hand there are pleasures forevermore. I don't know how anybody else feels, but I'm glad that he showed me the path to life. I'm glad that one day I was introduced to the path of life, and the path of life is a person, and his name is Jesus. He is the path to life. He is the way, he is the truth, and he is the life. He is the very path of life, whose death, burial, and resurrection makes the way for all of us. Because when Jesus died, he was not abandoned by the Father, and the Father did not allow him to stay in death. But after Jesus died, and after he descended into hell, and after he preached to the spirits held captive, early Sunday morning, God raised him from the dead with all power in his hand, and he is the way. And I don't know about you, but I'm determined to trust him. I'm determined to surrender to him. He is my Lord. He is my Savior. He is my King. He is my portion. He upholds my lot, and he keeps my strength, and he's drawn the lines of my life. Am I talking to anybody who can testify, I made him my Lord? Have you made him your Lord? Have you made him your King? Is he your expectation? Are you able to say, I know that there are good things that the Lord has in mind for me? Why? Because the Lord is good. I had fainted unless I had believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord and be of good courage, and he will strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. What are you expecting from God? I'm expecting God to be good. I'm expecting God to be great. I'm expecting God to be mighty. I'm expecting God to be awesome. I'm expecting God to be deliverance. I'm expecting God to be healer. I'm expecting God to be a way maker. I'm expecting God to fight my battles. I'm expecting God to show me the way. I'm expecting God to lead me through. I'm expecting God to bring me past. I'm expecting God to bring me over, because he is God and he holds my world in his hands. Am I talking to anybody in here? He's who I expect. He's who I trust. I'm looking for God